Introduction. The main deficit in these children is their inability to sustain attention and to inhibit impulsive responses. Dr. Virginia Douglas stood behind a heavy wooden podium in Montreal. The year was 1972. The room was filled with men in dark suits, most of them puffing on pipes or scribbling in notebooks. They were some of the top psychologists in the world, and they were all there to talk about hyperactive boys. At that time, if a child couldn't sit still or was constantly picking fights on the playground, doctors called it hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. It was a fancy way of saying a kid was too wiggly. The experts were obsessed with the wiggling. They thought the problem was in the legs, the arms, and the loud voices of disruptive little boys. But Dr. Douglas saw something else. She had spent years watching these children, and she realized the experts were looking at the wrong thing. The movement wasn't the cause, it was just a symptom. The real struggle was happening deep inside the brain. It was a struggle to stay focused, to stop and think before acting, and to keep the mind on one track. Her speech that day changed everything. She shifted the focus from hyperactivity to attention. Because of her, the medical world eventually gave this struggle a new name: attention deficit disorder. But even as the name changed, a huge group of people remained in the shadows. The doctors were still looking for the wiggly boys. They weren't looking for the girls sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, staring out the window and dreaming of distant worlds. They weren't looking for the chatterboxes, who were told they were just too social. And they certainly weren't looking for the grown women who were drowning in a sea of laundry, missed deadlines, and a constant humming sense of not being enough. If you are reading this, you might be one of those women. You might have spent decades wondering why things that seem so easy for everyone else feel like you are trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. You might have been told you were gifted but lazy or sensitive, or just a mess. You have likely spent your whole life wearing a mask, trying to act like a person whose brain works differently than yours. And you are probably exhausted. The view from the kitchen floor. It is 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in Chicago. Sarah Jenkins is sitting on her kitchen floor, and she is crying. Sarah is 38 years old. She is a senior marketing manager at a tech company. She is smart, she is funny, and to anyone looking from the outside, she has it all together. Her LinkedIn profile is impressive. Her kids are healthy. Her husband Mark is kind. But right now, Sarah feels like a total fraud. In front of her is a mountain of laundry that has been sitting there for 4 days. It has reached a point where she can no longer remember what is clean and what is dirty, so she just keeps adding to the pile. In the corner of the kitchen, there is a doom pile, a stack of mail, school forms, half-finished craft projects, and a single shoe that has been growing for months. She walks past it every day, and every day it feels like the pile is judging her. The reason she is crying tonight isn't the laundry, though. It's Spirit Day. Earlier that evening, as she was tucking her 6-year-old son into bed, he asked, "Mom, did you get my orange shirt ready for tomorrow?" Sarah's heart dropped. She had completely forgotten. She had missed the email from the school. She had missed the flyer in his backpack. She had missed the text in the class group chat. To most people, a forgotten orange shirt is a small mistake. To Sarah, it feels like a moral failure. It feels like proof that she is a bad mom. It's the final straw after a day of forgetting to reply to her boss, losing her car keys twice, and staring at a blank computer screen for 3 hours while her brain felt like a radio stuck between 2 stations playing nothing but static. Sarah is a master of masking. She has spent her life learning how to smile, how to apologize quickly, and how to stay up until 2 a.m. to finish the work she couldn't start at 2 p.m. She has become an expert at pretending she isn't struggling. But the mask is cracking. The strategies she used in her 20s, pure caffeine and the fear of failure, aren't working anymore. The weight of being a professional, a mother, and a person in the world has become too heavy. While she sits there, she pulls out her phone and starts scrolling. She sees a video of a woman talking about ADHD in women. The woman doesn't talk about being a wiggly boy. She talks about executive dysfunction. She talks about internalized hyperactivity, a mind that never shuts up even when the body is still. She talks about the deep, burning shame of being a smart woman who can't figure out how to do the dishes. Sarah feels a strange electric shock of recognition. For the first time in her life, she doesn't feel like a failure. She feels like she might finally have an explanation. The glass maze. For many women, living with undiagnosed ADHD is like being trapped in a glass maze. From a distance, everything looks clear. You can see the goal. You know exactly what you need to do. You can see the people around you walking straight to the finish line. They make it look so simple. They decide to do a task and then they just do it. You start walking toward your goal, but suddenly, thump. You hit an invisible wall. You back up, try another way, and thump. Another wall. You can't see the walls, but you can feel them. These walls are made of executive dysfunction, sensory overload, and emotional storms. Because the walls are invisible, you start to think the problem is you. You think you're just not trying hard enough. You think you're lazy. You think you're broken. You spend so much energy trying not to hit the glass that you end up exhausted before you've even moved 10 feet. You learn to mask by standing very still so no one sees you hitting the walls. You pretend you're exactly where you want to be. But here's the truth, the maze isn't your fault. Your brain was simply built with a different map. The struggle you feel every day is real. It is a neurobiological reality. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not a character flaw. It's a matter of brain chemistry. Your brain handles dopamine, the chemical that helps us start tasks and feel rewarded, differently than a neurotypical brain. When you understand this, the glass walls don't necessarily disappear, but they become visible. And once you can see them, you can build a way over, under, or around them. A new way to see yourself. This book is not about fixing you. You are not a project that needs to be completed, or a broken machine that needs new parts. You are a woman with a spicy brain that has been trying to survive in a world built for a completely different kind of mind. The goal of our journey together is a total transformation. Right now, you might feel like Sarah, drowning in doom piles, paralyzed by your to-do list, and carrying a heavy backpack full of shame. You might feel like you are constantly behind in life, no matter how hard you run. By the time you finish this book, you will be an expert on your own brain. You will understand why you do the things you do, and more importantly, you will know how to work with your nature instead of fighting against it. We are going to replace that shame with radical self-compassion. We are going to build systems that are ADHD-friendly, meaning they don't require you to be a perfectly consistent, organized robot to work. We are going to talk about hormonal clarity, why your ADHD symptoms seem to go crazy the week before your period, and how to manage that dopamine drop. Low energy systems, how to keep your house and life functioning even on days when your brain battery is at 5%. Emotional regulation, tools for handling the intense, stinging feeling of rejection and the meltdowns that come when life gets too loud or too much. The dopamine menu, how to feed your brain the stimulation it craves so you don't end up lost in a scroll hole on your phone for 4 hours. This isn't about trying harder. You've already tried harder than anyone else. This is about trying differently. Why you can trust this journey. You might be wondering if this is just another self-help book that will end up in your own personal doom pile of half-read books. I understand that fear. Many of us have a library of books we bought in a moment of hyperfocus, only to lose interest by chapter 3. This book is different because it is built on the shoulders of giants and the lived experiences of women who have been exactly where you are. We will look at the science of the brain, but we will keep it simple. We will look at history, seeing how women like Hedy Lamarr and Elizabeth Blackwell navigated worlds that weren't built for them. The strategies in these pages aren't based on shoulds. They are based on how the ADHD brain actually works. We aren't going to talk about color coding your planner if your brain hates planners. We are going to talk about why your brain hates planners and what to use instead. Everything here is designed to be actionable, even when you are overwhelmed. It is designed for the woman who is tired of being told to just get a calendar. The road ahead. We are going to follow Sarah's story as she moves from her kitchen floor meltdown to a life where she finally feels like she's in the driver's seat. We will see her learn to stop apologizing for her brain and start advocating for what she needs at work and at home. We will travel through the history of how we got here, from the early days of Dr. Douglas to the modern neurospicy community that is finally giving women a place to belong. Along the way, you will meet some incredible women. Hedy Lamarr, the Hollywood star who couldn't stop her mind from inventing the technology that makes your Wi-Fi work today. Elizabeth Blackwell, who had to build her own systems for success when the entire medical world tried to lock her out. Maria Montessori, who realized that if you change the environment to fit the person, the bad behavior disappears. We will break down the executive function gap, that frustrating space between knowing what you need to do and actually being able to start. We will tackle time blindness, the ADHD tax, and the great burnout that so many of us hit in our 30s and 40s. But most of all, we are going to talk about you. We are going to talk about the brilliance that often hides behind the ADHD fog. We are going to talk about your creativity, your ability to connect ideas that no one else sees, and your incredible resilience. You have been playing the game of life on hard mode for years without even knowing it. Imagine what you can do once you finally have the right controls. The glass walls are starting to become visible. The mask is coming off. It is time to stop trying to be a normal person and start being the successful, vibrant ADHD woman you were meant to be. The journey from I am bad to my brain is different begins right now. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Day the Mask Cracked. The book had a thick blue cover and weighed nearly 3 pounds. It was 494 pages of lists, categories, and codes. To a casual observer, it looked like a boring textbook or a very dry dictionary. But when this book, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 3rd edition, was published in 1980, it held the power to change how millions of people saw themselves. Inside those pages, tucked between other labels, was a shift in language that would eventually crack the mask women had been wearing for decades. Before this book arrived, doctors used a different name for the struggle we now call ADHD. They called it hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. The name itself told a story. It suggested that the problem was only about movement, children who couldn't sit still, kids who ran too fast, or boys who climbed on desks. It also suggested that the problem was something you outgrew. It was a childhood thing. If you were a quiet girl staring out the window, or a woman struggling to keep her house in order, this book didn't have a name for you. You weren't hyperkinetic. You were just considered spacey, lazy, or emotional. The myth of the disruptive boy. For a long time, the world believed a very specific lie about ADHD. The myth was simple: ADHD is a behavior problem found in young, loud boys. If you didn't look like a 7-year-old boy bouncing off the walls of a classroom, people assumed your brain worked just fine. This belief wasn't just a guess, it was built into the way doctors were trained. They looked for outward signs of trouble. They looked for disruption. When we think of disruption, we think of noise. We think of the student who interrupts the teacher, or the child who can't wait their turn in line. Because boys are often socialized to be more active and external with their energy, they were the ones who got the labels. They were the ones who got the help. But the truth is much quieter. ADHD isn't a problem of having too much energy or being bad. It is a problem of regulation. It is about how the brain manages its focus, its emotions, and its actions. While some people's ADHD looks like a physical whirlwind, for many women, the whirlwind is entirely on the inside. A girl might sit perfectly still in class while her mind is miles away, chasing 10 different thoughts at once. She might be a perfectionist, who spends 3 hours on a 1-hour assignment because she is terrified of making a mistake. She isn't disrupting the class, so no one notices she is drowning. She learns to hide her struggle. She learns to mask. The woman who saw the truth. In 1972, a woman named Dr. Virginia Douglas stood in front of a large group of her peers at the Canadian Psychological Association. At the time, everyone was still obsessed with the idea of hyperactivity. They thought the hyper part was the whole story. Dr. Douglas disagreed. She had spent years watching how children actually worked, and she noticed something the men in her field had missed. She argued that the real core of the issue wasn't the running or the jumping. The real issue was the stop, look and listen part of the brain. She pointed out that these children struggled to sustain attention and to stop themselves from acting on every single impulse. She shifted the focus from the legs to the mind. Because of her work, the Big Blue Book published in 1980 finally changed the name to Attention Deficit Disorder, ADD. For the first time, hyperactivity was listed as something that might be there but didn't have to be. This was the first crack in the mask. It opened a door for people who were quiet, internal, and dreamers. However, even with this change, the world wasn't ready for adult women. The checklists doctors used were still based on how teachers saw little boys. They asked questions like, does the child climb on things excessively? They didn't ask, does the woman feel an overwhelming sense of dread when she looks at a pile of mail? Or, does she feel like she is performing a character just to get through a grocery store run? Sarah's breaking point. Sarah Jenkins sat in a small plastic chair in a doctor's office in downtown Chicago. She was 38 years old, a mother of 2, and a successful marketing manager. On paper, her life looked perfect. Her LinkedIn profile was full of wins. Her Instagram showed a tidy kitchen and happy kids. But as she sat there, she felt like an imposter who was about to be caught. She had spent her whole life building a version of herself that the world liked. She was the one who stayed late at the office to double-check every detail. She was the one who never forgot a birthday, because she had 5 different calendar alerts set for every single person she knew. She was exhausted. The mask she wore was heavy, and it was starting to slip. The night before, she had sat on her kitchen floor and cried because she forgot Spirit Day at her son's school. It sounds like a small thing, but to Sarah it was the final proof that she was failing. She had hit a wall. The tricks she used in her 20s, drinking way too much coffee, pulling all-nighters and obsessively checking her lists, weren't working anymore. The demands of motherhood and a high-level career had finally outpaced her ability to pretend she was normal. When the doctor looked at her and said, "Sarah, you have ADHD," she didn't feel sad at first. She felt a strange, cold numbness. Then the doctor said something that changed everything. "It's not your fault. You've been running a marathon with a broken leg for 38 years. In that moment, the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Sarah started to cry, but they weren't the tears of a failure. They were the tears of someone who had finally been seen. She realized she wasn't lazy, crazy, or stupid. She was just tired of trying to be someone she wasn't. The glass maze. When a woman is diagnosed late in life, she often realizes she has been living in what we call the glass maze. Imagine you are standing in a maze made of clear glass. You can see the exit. You can see the people you love walking around freely on the other side. You know exactly where you want to go. But every time you try to move forward, you hit a wall. Thump. You try to start a new project at work, but you can't figure out the first step. Thump. You try to keep the laundry from becoming a mountain, but the task feels like climbing Everest. Thump. You try to be chill and relaxed in a social group, but your brain is screaming at you that you just said something weird. Because the walls are made of glass, no one else can see them. When you tell people you are struggling, they say things like, "Just use a planner," or "Everyone gets a little distracted sometimes." They see you standing still and assume you aren't trying. They don't see the bruises you have from hitting those invisible barriers over and over again. Masking is the act of pretending the glass walls aren't there. It is the effort you put into making sure no one sees you hit the wall. You learn to walk very slowly. You learn to feel around with your hands before you take a step. You mimic the movements of the people on the outside, so they think you are moving through the world just as easily as they are. The cost of this pretending is massive. It takes a huge amount of brain power to mask. It's like running a dozen apps in the background of your phone. Eventually, the battery is going to die. That is why so many women hit a wall in their 30s or 40s. The battery of their youth runs out, and the mask becomes too heavy to hold up. Why the mask cracks now? You might wonder why so many women are getting diagnosed right now. It isn't because ADHD is trendy, or because everyone suddenly has a short attention span. It's because the world has changed, and our old ways of hiding are no longer enough. The loss of structure. When we are young, school provides a lot of structure. There are bells, schedules, and teachers telling us what to do. When that structure goes away in adulthood, the ADHD brain has to work 10 times harder to create its own. The second shift. Women are often expected to manage the emotional labor of a household. This means remembering the grocery list, the doctor's appointments, the school forms, and the holiday gifts. This is a massive load on the brain's executive function, the exact part of the brain that ADHD affects. The digital noise. We live in a world designed to steal our attention. For a brain that already struggles to filter out the noise, the modern world is a sensory nightmare. Hormonal shifts. As women age, their levels of estrogen change. Estrogen helps the brain use dopamine, the chemical that helps us focus. When estrogen drops, like during your period or during perimenopause, ADHD symptoms often get much worse. When these factors combine, the mask cracks. The perfect employee starts missing deadlines. The organized mom starts losing her keys every day. The woman who was always fine suddenly finds herself having a meltdown over a messy living room. The grief flood. After the diagnosis, most women expect to feel happy. They think they will feel fixed. But for many, the first thing they feel is grief. This is what Sarah Jenkins felt in the weeks after her doctor's visit. It is the grief flood. You grieve for the girl you used to be. You think about the times you were called dramatic or forgetful, and how much you hated yourself for it. You think about the years you spent wondering why you couldn't just be normal. You realize that you weren't a failed version of a neurotypical person. You were a perfectly normal version of a person with ADHD, but no one told you the rules of the game. This grief is a necessary part of the process. You have to let the old version of yourself, the one who was just lazy, die so that the new version of yourself can live. You have to stop apologizing for the way your brain works. The diagnosis is the key that lets you out of the glass maze. It doesn't mean the walls disappear instantly, but it does mean you finally have a map. You can see where the barriers are. You can stop walking into them head first and start building paths around them. Learning to see the walls. The first step in healing is learning to identify when you are masking. Masking isn't always bad. Sometimes we do it to stay safe or professional. But when it becomes your only way of existing, it destroys you. Here are a few ways masking shows up in a woman's life. Over-preparing. Spending 5 hours preparing for a 30-minute meeting because you're afraid you'll forget a word or lose your train of thought. Social mimicry. Watching how other people sit, talk, and react, and then copying them so you don't seem too much. The quiet struggle. Saying, "I'm just tired," when you are actually experiencing a total sensory shutdown. Obsessive checking. Checking your purse for your keys 10 times before you leave because you don't trust your own brain. People-pleasing. Saying yes to everything because you feel like you have to make up for your perceived flaws. When you start to notice these behaviors, don't judge them. Just name them. Say to yourself, "I am masking right now." This simple act starts to take the power away from the mask. It allows you to breathe. A new kind of strength. The world often views ADHD as a deficit. They see it as a lack of something. But as you move through this journey, you will find that it is actually a difference in regulation. Your brain is like a powerful race car with bicycle brakes. The engine is amazing, but the stopping system needs some work. The goal isn't to turn your race car into a bicycle. The goal is to get better brakes and a better map. Dr. Virginia Douglas didn't just change a name in a blue book. She gave us permission to look under the hood. She helped us see that the disruptive boy was only one small part of the story. The rest of the story belongs to the women who have been holding it all together with sheer willpower and a heavy mask. Sarah Jenkins didn't stop being a marketing manager after her diagnosis. She didn't stop being a mom, but she did stop crying on her kitchen floor. She started using clear bins so she could see her things. She started telling her boss, "I need this list in an email because my brain works better with written instructions." She stopped trying to be the woman who did it all, and started being the woman who did what worked for her. The day the mask cracks is the most important day of your life. It is the day you stop trying to fix your character and start managing your chemistry. It is the day you realize that you aren't broken. You are just different. And different is where the magic happens. Different is how inventions are made. Different is how new ideas are born. Different is why you are witty, creative, and resilient. You have survived a world that wasn't built for you. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you a warrior. The marathon with the broken leg is over. It is time to sit down, let the bone heal, and learn a new way to move. The road ahead isn't about fixing your brain so it acts like everyone else's. It's about building a life that is worthy of the brain you actually have. As you close this chapter, take a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, you don't have to pretend. You can just be. The mask is cracked, and through those cracks, the light is finally starting to get in. You are not alone, and you are finally on your way home. Chapter 2: Why has my brain always felt like a radio between stations? If you walk through the halls of the Jena University Hospital in Germany today, you will see a building that looks like any other modern medical center. It is filled with bright lights, clean white floors, and doctors carrying tablets. It is a place of quiet order and high-tech machines. But if you could step back in time exactly 100 years to 1924, the scene would be very different. The air would smell like ozone and old paper. The rooms would be dim, lit by flickering bulbs and the soft glow of vacuum tubes. In one of those rooms, a man named Hans Berger sat surrounded by a mess of wires and metal boxes. He was a serious man with a stiff collar and a heavy burden. He was trying to do something that most of his friends thought was impossible, and maybe even a little bit crazy. He was trying to read a person's mind, not by guessing what they were thinking, but by measuring the electricity coming out of their head. Hans Berger was not a dreamer by nature. He was a scientist. But his obsession with the brain started with a moment that felt like magic. Years earlier, while he was in the military, a horse he was riding slipped and fell right in front of a heavy cannon. He nearly died. At that exact same moment, miles away, his sister felt a sudden wave of fear. She was so worried that she forced their father to send a telegram to Hans to make sure he was okay. Hans couldn't stop thinking about that telegram. How did she know? He became convinced that there must be some kind of psychic energy that humans could send to one another. He spent the next few decades trying to find it. He didn't find telepathy, but what he found instead changed everything we know about the ADHD brain. He discovered that the human brain never truly shuts up. The man who found the noise. For a long time, people thought the brain was like a steam engine. You put coal in, the pistons moved, and work got done. When the work was over, the engine cooled down and stopped. They believed that if you weren't thinking about something, your brain was basically at rest. Hans Berger proved them wrong. He invented a machine called the EEG. It used wires attached to the scalp to pick up tiny electrical signals. When he finally got the machine to work, he saw something incredible. Even when his subjects were sitting perfectly still in a dark room with their eyes closed, the machine showed a steady, pulsing wave of electricity. He called these alpha waves. This was a huge shock to the scientific world. It meant the brain was always busy. It was always humming. For someone with a neurotypical